are you worried for your own safety by speaking out against Putin?
Вы боитесь за свою жизнь, говоря вот так вот?
Знаете, меня каждый раз об этом спрашивают.
Do you know, this is the question I'm always asked every time.
Вот мне интересно, если у вас кто-нибудь из знакомых военный пилот, вы его каждый раз спрашиваете: слушай, ты боишься сегодня идти на работу?
But maybe one of you knows someone who is a fighter pilot. Do you actually ask them every time, are you afraid to fly that plane today?
А кто-то из вас, возможно, лично знаком с монтажниками, которые работают на огромной высоте.
Or perhaps some of you know people who work at huge heights.
Вы их спрашиваете каждый день: слушай, ты боишься идти на свою работу?
Do you also ask them, aren't you afraid going out and climbing that height every day of your life?
Я, к слову, работал монтажником.
And actually, I was one of the people who worked at heights, you know, assembling things.
Иногда действительно забывал пристегнуть карабин.
And sometimes I even forgot to put the safety harness on me.
И когда ты замечаешь, что ты его не пристегнул, и у тебя так пот по тебе стекает.
And when you suddenly realize, oh my God, there is no safety harness there, you start sweating profusely.
Ты думаешь, да, наверное, можно было бы найти получше работу.
And you start thinking, perhaps I chose the wrong job.
Тем не менее, каждый из нас занимается своим делом, и просто ты каждый день не думаешь о том, что это опасно.
Nevertheless, each of us does their own job, and you don't really think on a daily basis how risky that job is.
Martin, I just want to come back to the question about China. It is interesting. President Xi and President Putin have signed a memorandum of understanding. They've very publicly declared that they're going to make their relationship stronger. There's speculation, or perhaps it's more than that, I'm not sure, that President Xi's sort of first visit abroad for some time will be to Kazakhstan to meet President Putin. Is that an important relationship going forward beyond the sort of economics that Mikhail was describing?
It's always been a three-way dynamic, haven't you? You know, you go back to the days of Nixon and Kissinger, and China was always the sort of wild card that was played in that Cold War scenario, and I think China is very good at exploiting that card. Economically, it's a great opportunity for China because Russia is losing clients in the West, so China sees an opportunity to clean up economically, but politically, China has a very clear opportunity to become a world player, a much more important world player than it already is. We'll have to see how it goes between Xi and Putin, because there's a lot of rhetoric in these games, which is, is little more than rhetoric.
One more question online, and then I'll come back to you in the hall. Claire asks, do you think Putin has ambitions to escalate the war in Ukraine with countries in the Balkans?
Собирается ли он пойти на Балканы? То есть в планах входит эскалация войны на Украине?
Я убежден, что если бы Украина не оказалась настолько твердым орешком, сегодня у Путина точно были бы планы восстанавливать Советский Союз за пределами Украины.
I think had Ukraine not proved to be such a tough nut to crack for Putin, Putin would now build plans to go beyond Ukraine and build the Soviet Union beyond Ukraine.
Но украинцы сейчас иногда говорят, и они говорят правду, что они защищают не только свою свободу.
And when the Ukrainians tell us today that they are fighting not just for their freedom alone, they are right.
Это правда.
This is the truth.
All right, 3 more in the hall. Okay, there's. I'm going to take a couple over there and one at the back. And if I can get some more in, if you're quick, then maybe we can get some more in. Go on, go for it.
Hi, thank you very much. I just wanted to ask about, and you mentioned it, the sort of brain drain from Russia, and what you thought of policies now introduced by various European states, especially in the Baltics, banning Russian student visas. Do you think that that sort of policy is what's needed to drain Putin's economy, or is it so harmful to the long-term future of an open Russia that you'd be opposed to it?
Okay, and another one, there was a chap at the front. Yeah.
Thank you. It was really interesting to hear your take on how Putin gets input on different decisions he makes. You were talking about the economy, for example. And I'd love to hear your view on whether he sought any input before invading Ukraine,
Okay.
or whether that was a decision on his own.
All right, and there's one right at the back over there.
Good evening. I'm a Ukrainian refugee. I live in London now. I am here because of the war. And my question to Mikhail is, how can you explain the very huge percentage of support for Putin from Russian people? Please don't speak about Moscow citizens and diaspora. Thank you.
Okay, so 3 questions there. Could the brain drain actually be a way to weaken Russia, to bring Putin down? Was the decision to invade Ukraine Putin's alone? And how do you explain the Russian support for the war in Ukraine?
И как вы можете объяснить поддержку войны в Украине?
Утечка мозгов серьезно ослабляет режим.
The brain drain is really weakening the regime.
Я приведу вам только один пример.
Just one example.
Путин хотел отключить Россию от YouTube, но из внутриполитических соображений нужно было чем-то тогда его заменить.
So Putin wanted to block the YouTube in Russia, but because of the domestic reasons, he needed to replace YouTube with something else.
И они сделали такую систему, как RooTube.
So they created the RooTube instead of the YouTube.
И, в общем, она развивалась, и мы с ужасом ждали, когда она будет запущена.
So it had been developing for some time, and we were terrified to wait for the moment when it was going to be launched.
Потом начался вот этот отток специалистов, уехало 30 тысяч специалистов в области IT.
And then the 30,000 IT experts left Russia after the beginning of the war.
И RooTube рухнул.
And RooTube just collapsed.
Вы можете заметить, насколько меньше сейчас говорят про русских хакеров.
Have you noticed that they speak less and less about Russian hackers today?
Они уехали.
They have all left Russia.
The decision to invade Ukraine, was it Putin's alone?
Что
do you think?
касается решения атаковать Украину, то у Путина действительно было убеждение, что на Украине его встретят цветами.
So as for the decision to go into Ukraine, Putin really did think that they were going to accept or to meet him with open arms, with flowers.
Отмечу, сегодня он имеет гораздо лучшее представление о том, что происходит в Украине, но почему это впечатление было настолько ошибочным?
Mind you, today his idea of what's happening in Ukraine is much better. But why did he have that erroneous idea in the first place?
Ковид.
COVID. A simple answer.
Он находился в своем бункере, и очень было сокращено количество людей, с которыми он общался.
He was sitting in his bunker with a very, very small number of people he would communicate with.
И один из этих людей, господин Юрий Ковальчук.
One of these people was Yuri Kovalchuk.
К слову, его отец родом из украинского города Николаева.
Whose father actually comes from Nikolaev in Ukraine.
Идеи Путина на эту тему во многом, ну если не рождены, то поддержаны господином Ковальчуком.
So Mr. Kovalchuk was perhaps not the author necessarily of the intervention in Ukraine, but at least a supporter of that idea, very much so.
Ну и, наконец, почему такая поддержка войны?
And finally, the last question about the support for the war in Russia.
Ну, во-первых, я бы все-таки на вашем месте не настолько верил результатам вот этих вот социологических опросов.
Well, first of all, I wouldn't really believe all the opinion polls we hear about and their results.
Я много разговаривал с профессиональными социологами, и все они мне сказали, что социологические опросы при диктатуре во время войны вообще ни о чем не свидетельствуют.
A lot of sociologists have told me that the results of a sociological survey under a dictatorship during a war are not really a witness or a testimony of anything.
Вот здесь один из этих социологов сидит, можете с ним потом пообщаться.
One of those sociologists are actually present here, so you can have a chat with them later.
Когда идет опрос, обычно в обычном состоянии отвечают 2 человека из 10, которым подходят опросчики.
In a normal situation, out of 10 people being surveyed, 2 would give answers, would actually respond.
И обычно эти 2 в достаточной степени представляют то же мнение, что оставшиеся 8.
And those 2, in fact, represent the opinion of the remaining 8, more or less.
Теперь представьте себе, диктатура, война. К вам подходит человек, задает вопрос, вы за войну или против?
And now imagine that you are living in a dictatorship and there is war going on. Somebody approaches you in the street and says, are you pro-war or against it?
И у вас есть возможность не ответить.
Well, one choice you have is just not to reply.
О чем свидетельствуют ответы оставшихся 2?
So the remaining 2 who do reply, what is this testimony of?
Это то, что эти 2 были агенты ФСБ.
They are FSB agents, that's what.
Ну а если говорить серьезно, то, конечно, вот это вот воспоминание об империи, оно, конечно, сказывается.
But seriously speaking, this nostalgia about for the empire is having a role in it, definitely.
Именно поэтому поддержка войны настолько велика в сегменте 55+, и настолько мала в сегменте 30-.
This is why the people 55 and older support it much more than people 30 and younger.
И это дает нам надежду.
And this gives us hope.
Interesting. All right, I'm going to take 2 more and then we're out of time, I'm afraid. Okay, I'm going to go right to the back there because I think you guys haven't had a fair shout.
Just very quickly, Alexei Navalny, is he a good man? And how come he's still alive?
Okay, and there was one hand that went up. Okay, I'm going to go with this guy there. There's just a chap there. Yeah, a little bit. There you go.
Hi. What, if anything, gives you hope?
Okay, so is Navalny a good guy and what brings you hope?
Вообще есть что-то, что дает надежду?
Навальный сегодня это политзаключенный, и поэтому я его поддерживаю вне зависимости от того, насколько совпадают или расходятся наши взгляды.
Today, Navalny is a political prisoner, so I would support him irrespective of whether our views and ideas coincide or not.
Единственное, от чего я хочу предостеречь всех, по крайней мере, своих сограждан, но и западных лидеров. Не ищите доброго царя. Добрых царей в России не бывает.
The only thing I would like to warn all Russian citizens and people in the West against is not to look for a kind Tsar. There would never be a kind Tsar in Russia.
Горбачев попытался быть хорошим царем. Сколько он им остался? 1 год.
So Gorbachev tried to be this good Tsar in Russia. How long did he last? 1 year.
But do you think Alexei Navalny wants to be a good Tsar?
А что, Навальный хочет быть таким хорошим царем?
Еще раз. Мы все, я уверен, что и Путин хотел быть хорошим царем. И все хотят быть хорошими. Никто не хочет быть плохими.
Well, the thing is that nobody wants to be a bad Tsar. Everybody intends to be a good one,
Well.
including Putin when he started.
But a Tsar as opposed to a Democrat?
Если мы хотим свободную, демократическую, неагрессивную Россию, она должна быть парламентской республикой и глубоко федеративной парламентской республикой.
I think if you want to see a free, liberal, democratic Russia, which is not an aggressive country, it has to be a parliamentary republic and deeply federal.
Я вам сейчас постараюсь рассказать анекдот. Это трудно, но мы постараемся.
So we're going to try a joke. It's difficult, but we'll try.
У нас есть завод в России, который производит ужасные автомашины.
There is a factory in Russia which makes really bad cars,
Тольятти.
Tolyatti.
И вот стоят главный инженер и директор этого завода и смотрят вниз.
So imagine a chief engineer and a director of the Tolyatti factory standing there looking down,
На завод.
looking over the factory.
И говорят, оборудование меняли, ничего не получилось.
They're saying, we've tried to change all the equipment, but it didn't work.
Модели машин меняли, ничего не получилось.
We've tried to change the models that we're making here in the factory. Didn't work.
Что делать-то?
What should we do?
Главный инженер говорит, я тебе говорил, место проклятое.
The chief engineer says, this is a God-forsaken place. This is, I've told you.
Вот место царя в России, оно проклятое.
So the place of a Tsar in Russia, it's God-forsaken, it's cursed.
Когда туда приходит хороший человек, он спустя короткое время становится плохим.
Even a good person sitting in that chair sometime later becomes a bad person.
Interesting. Martin, do you have any thoughts on that?
I just wanted to tell an anecdote, a joke, in connection with why so many people in Russia seem to support this dreadful war in Ukraine and how people think about what they say about their attitudes. And my favourite joke is about the two FSB men who at the end of a very long day are having a drink in the FSB canteen in Moscow. And Dmitry says to Ivan, he says, Ivan, tell me, what do you really think about this Putin regime that we live under? And Ivan says, the same as you do. And Dmitry says, in that case, it's my duty to arrest you.
We are really out of time, but I am going to ask you, that's a wonderful kind of end thought, to answer that last question, which was, what gives you hope, Mikhail?
На что вы надеетесь? В чем надежда?
А я же сказал, те, кому сейчас нет 30, они не помнят ту страну, которую помним мы.
Well, I've already answered this question partly when I said that those under 30 do not remember the country we remember.
Путин умрет, и мое поколение тоже уйдет, хотя я моложе Путина на 11 лет.
Putin is going to die, and my generation is going to leave the stage as well, although I'm younger than Putin by 11 years.
Я вот был в Германии и разговаривал там с людьми и спрашивал, а вот когда у вас реально прошел отказ от нацизма?
When I spoke to people in Germany, I asked them, when did people forgo Nazism really in the end? When did they get rid of it in themselves?
И они мне все в один голос ответили. Где-то, говорит, в 68-м.
And they all spoke and said as one man, about 1968.
Поколение ушло.
It took a generation change.
Вот то, на что я надеюсь на новое поколение.
So this is my hope, the new generation.